Chapter 7. After Delphine had left the barn, Marcel waited a few minutes and then got back on his bike. As he rode along the familiar streets towards home, his mind was racing as quickly as his feet were pedalling. So Delphine and her family were Jewish. That explained a lot of things. Things that did not quite fit together before suddenly did. Like the pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle that he and Papa had worked on together all of last summer. There, coming down the street, he caught a glimpse of two gendarmes. It was true that they were not as scary as the Germans, but with the dangerous secrets he now knew, he did not want to meet up with them. Quickly, he turned a sharp corner and hid behind a big shrub to avoid them. He was just in time too, because they stopped walking, and one of them pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Marcel stayed where he was, concealed by dead leaves and thorny branches. Remaining motionless and silent, he strained to listen out to what they were saying. Much of it was uttered too softly for him to make out, though he could tell they were gossiping and complaining. A few words were clear enough to understand. Very soon, the officials were going to recheck the papers of newcomers to town, especially those who had arrived in the last 18 months. Marcel knew Delphine and her family had got into Alcoin more recently than that, and that their papers were false. A fact that might easily be discovered during a routine check. He remained where he was, choked with fear. The gendarme, who had been smoking, stubbed out his cigarette with the heel of his boot. Then the two gendarmes walked off. When the coast was clear, Marcel sped home. At dinner that night, he shared with his parents what he'd heard the gendarmes saying. He wished he could tell them what he now knew about Delphine, but he didn't want to break his word to her. That's bad. His mother put down her knife and fork. They'll be looking for people with suspicious papers. And if they find any... What will happen? Asked Marcel. They could be deported. Deported to where? There was a silence. Then his father said, We're not really sure, but we've heard some talk about work camps. More like prison camps, his mother said grimly. Delphine had said internment camps. Was this the same thing? But he couldn't ask his parents. He had promised. Work camps? Prison camps? Why would they be sending people there? What did they do? He tried to get more information while still keeping his friend's confession a secret. It's not about what they did, his father said. It's more about who they are. What are you talking about? But he knew. He knew. The Germans are deporting Jews, said his mother. It's been happening in Germany, Poland, Lithuania, and it's no different here. The Nazis have their policies, and the French are just going along with them, added his father. Delphine and her family were Jewish. If they were deported, where exactly would they be deported to? And what would happen to them when they got there? Marcel had sworn not to reveal Delphine's secret to anyone, not even to his parents. But with what he had found out on the way home, he knew they were more at risk than they realised. What if his parents could help her? Would it be all right if he broke his promise? Would it be all right to break his promise? He wished he knew. Marcel met Delphine in the barn the next day after school. It was the 1st of December and had gotten too cold for a bicycle race. Instead, they played cards using a worn-out deck Delphine's mother had brought from Paris. After their game, they lingered for a few minutes to talk. I told my parents about the Gisbato who came to school, she said. That really frightened them. They said it's not safe here anymore. They're right. It isn't, he blurted out. The officials are going to recheck the papers of anyone new to town. I overheard it last night. He hadn't been able to find the right moment to tell her before now. Delphine's face went white. She took a deep, shaky breath. Thank you for telling me. I already heard my dad telling my mum that we have to escape. Now I know that he's right. Escape? Where? The hair on the back of Marcel's neck began to prickle, and he knew it wasn't just from the crisp, cold air. I'm not sure, she said, tugging on the tip of a braid. In the distance, the church bell tolled the hour and Delphine stood up. I've got to go. She brushed off the back of her coat. I'll see you tomorrow, I guess. Marcel rode home. That brisk wind had turned sharper and colder, and he shivered under his jacket. He was glad to see the lights of his own kitchen window. After dinner, he went to his room and closed the door. He was still undecided about whether to reveal Delphine's secret to his parents. She was afraid, he knew. But what if they could help? A knock on the door startled him. Come in, he said. I need you to take a loaf of bread to someone tomorrow, said his father. But since it's getting darker earlier these days, I was wondering if you could do it before you went to school. Do I have to? He didn't want to get up that early. He might even be late getting to class. Usually his parents did not like him doing anything that would interfere with school. Education comes first, Maman was fond of saying. Yes, you do, said his father. So the message inside the loaf of bread must be really important. Urgent, even. He thought of everything that was happening now. The Gisparto, Delphine and her family. All right, Papa, he said. I'll go first thing in the morning. Thank you, his father said. I won't be here when you leave, but Maman will have the bread ready for you. Where will you be? I heard there might be flour available in Perpignan. I'm going to drive over and pick it up. I haven't been able to get a new bag for a couple of weeks, and we're almost all out. Marcel understood. His father needed the flour to bake the bread that was their living. Then he had another thought. If there were no loaves of bread, his parents would not have a place to stash the messages they needed to send. That night, Marcel lay awake for a long time. He was so worried about having to get up early that he was unable to drift off to sleep. It must have been close to dawn when he finally felt himself relaxing. The sky was growing lighter, and he could hear the first chirps of the birds. He really should be getting up to deliver the bread soon, but he was tired, so very tired. He'd close his eyes for just a few minutes, and then he'd get up and be on his way. The next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming into the room. Marcel bolted straight up in the narrow bed. What time was it? He must have slept too long. Now what was going to happen? Was it too late to deliver the bread? He grabbed his clothes as quickly as he could and went to the other room. The chairs were arranged neatly around the table, which was covered in a red and white checked cloth. The familiar earthenware bowl sat in its usual spot. Beyond that were the armchairs in which his parents liked to sit in after dinner, and the window with a starched lace curtain. But the room was empty. No one was there. Marcel clattered downstairs to the bakery. No one was there either. The shelves were not even half full. The door was locked, and the sign saying Fermé, closed, hung in the window. All of this was very strange. Then he spied a loaf of bread wrapped up in a white cloth, and a small piece of paper with his name on it pinned to the top. So that was the loaf of bread he had been meant to deliver. But where were his parents? He knew his father was picking up flour, but shouldn't he be back by now? And what about his mother? She was always here to open up in the morning. That was one of their busiest times. There was a clock hanging on the wall behind the cash register. It was 9:30, so he was late for school too. He picked up the bread and gripped it tightly in his hands. Should he pedal over with the bread, even though it was late, or should he go to school? He'd never been so confused in his life. Or scared. Where were his parents? Maybe something bad happened to them. If he knew they were members of the resistance, maybe someone else did too. And what if they had been betrayed and they were in danger? Then he heard a noise outside. "Papa!" He raced to meet him just as he was unlocking the door and walking in. What a relief to see him. "Marcel!" His father seemed surprised to find him in the bakery. "Why aren't you at school?" Then he noticed the bread in Marcel's hands. "You didn't deliver it, did you?" he asked. "No, Papa, I didn't. I'm really sorry, but I was so worried about waking up in time, I couldn't fall asleep for hours. Then I overslept this morning." Marcel thought he was too old for tears, but he felt like crying now. "And then I didn't see you or my man, and I got kind of scared, and I didn't know what to do." "The wheel of the wagon came off, and I had to stop to fix it," Papa said. "That's why it took me so long to get back." He looked around the bakery. "I don't know where your mother is," he said. "I have to find her." "What about the bread?" Marcel asked. Father took the loaf and stared at it for several seconds. "I'm afraid it's too late to deliver it now. You go on to school. The delivery will have to wait." "But what about the message, Papa?" Marcel couldn't hold in the question a second longer. "Isn't that why you wanted me to deliver it? Because of the message inside?" His heart was hammering wildly as he waited for his father's reply. "So you know," his father said. He didn't seem surprised or alarmed, only very sad, even defeated. "Maman and I have wanted to keep it from you. How did you find out?" Marcel told him the whole story. Papa listened carefully, and when Marcel was finished, he said, "Maman and I agonised over whether we should let you make these trips and deliver the messages. She said no at first, but in the end, we thought it was important enough to take the risk. So much is at stake, for all of us." He took a deep breath and went on. "We didn't tell you because it was safer that way, and we didn't want to frighten you. But now I see you've known for a while and made the trips anyway. You're a brave boy, and I'm proud of you. Maman will be too." Marcel felt 3 inches taller. That's how proud he was. But there was still Maman to worry about. "But where is Maman?" he asked. "I don't know," said his father grimly, "but I'm going to find her." "What can I do?" "I want to help you. Go to school. Act like nothing's wrong. That's all." "That's all?" Marcel asked. "That's enough for right now," Papa said. "All right." But then Marcel saw his father was pulling aside the white cloth and slicing the bread lengthwise. "What are you doing now?" he asked. "Getting rid of this." His father pulled the folded note from the centre of the loaf. "It's not safe to have it anymore." Then he walked to the sink at the far end of the shop, placed the note in the basin, pulled out a book of matches. The tiny flame flared brightly before he let it fall onto the note. In a matter of seconds, he was running water, washing whatever was left down the drain. Then he turned back to Marcel. "Go on now," he said. "There's nothing more either of us can do if we stay here." When Marcel did not move, he added, "We need to pretend things are all right. That's the safest and the smartest course." Papa was right. Marcel knew that. So, hoisting his satchel over his arm, he headed down the stairs where his bicycle was waiting. He sped along the familiar streets that now felt strange and sinister. Soon he was at school, where he hoped he was ready for whatever the day would bring.